Apple just dropped their brand new iPhone 17 lineup, and a lot of you guys are going to be picking up new iPhones or upgrading this year. And with the introduction of their new camera system and liquid glass along with iOS 26, there's a bunch of new camera settings for you to change. There's also the introduction of the brand new 8x optical zoom camera on the Pro models, and I recently posted a carousel online showcasing the capability of this new camera. So I showed where I was standing and what my perspective looked like, and just how much you can zoom in with the new 8x camera and retain quality and have amazing results. I also posted another carousel showing off the macro capabilities of the iPhone 17s and just how much detail you can get and really get into things that you can't even see with your own eyes. And all the comments on those posts were people asking me about my camera settings and how I got these results. And luckily for all of you guys, I make this video every single year showcasing and sharing all of my settings that you need to change on your iPhone to get the best possible results. So in this video, I'm going to be going over all of the settings that you need to change on your brand new iPhone, and whether you have an iPhone 17 or an older iPhone, you can definitely follow along because some of these settings will apply to you. If for whatever reason you don't see something on your iPhone in this video, it's likely either reserved for the 17 models or the Pro models exclusively. There will be another video in the future coming out on the best video settings for the iPhone 17s. I'm still tweaking around with the new Apple Pro Raw to make sure that that's all dialed in. So make sure you guys definitely subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that video. And the last time I asked you guys to subscribe, I did tell you that only 1% of you guys that watch my videos were actually subscribed to the channel. I'm glad to report we've gotten that up to 1.4%. So that is an increase. So I definitely really appreciate it and hope you guys will continue to subscribe. It really helps me make these videos. And I know I'm doing a lot of yapping more than I usually do before I get into the settings, but I will also be making a week in the life video with the brand new iPhone 17 Pro Max as well as the iPhone 17 Air. So again, make sure you stick around with that. And now with all of my yapping out of the way, let's finally get into the new settings. Okay, so first off, we're just gonna dive into the camera app, and I just access it by hitting the capture or camera control button, and that launches my camera app. We're gonna start off in the photo section, and don't worry if yours doesn't look like mine. It will by the end of this video. I've also turned off some settings for demonstration purposes in this video. Now, first off, you're gonna notice that you have a bunch of lenses at the bottom. Now, you are able to zoom in between these lenses. So what I mean, for example, if I hit the 1x and then I use both fingers to pinch to zoom, you're gonna notice that I get that 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and so on. Now, you don't want to be doing that. You only wanna be using the lenses that are available to you in your camera app because those are all optical quality. If you try and go to those 1.1s and 1.2s, you're actually digitally zooming in and you're going to be losing quality across the board on all of your photos. So all you want to do is only use that 0.5, the 1x, the 2x, the 4x, as well as the brand new 8x. Okay, now with that little disclaimer out of the way, I want you guys to head into your settings app and then go down to camera, and this is where we're going to change a lot of our camera settings. So at the very top, you're going to see camera control. I want you to go ahead and hit that. Now for the launch camera, you just want to select camera. This is going to launch your camera whenever you use the capture control button. I don't actually use it to change any of my settings, and I leave the setting on single click, and I make sure that require screen is turned on so I'm not accidentally hitting the button. In terms of controls for camera adjustments, I have that turned off because I don't want to be changing any of that stuff with the capture control button. I do that all on screen. Now, the new thing that I noticed that is here is called the lock, focus, and exposure button. I make sure that this is turned on, and this is actually a really cool setting. It's like a professional camera. So if you just go ahead and lightly tap and hold on the camera control button, you're gonna notice that it locks the focus in place, which is great because then whenever you're moving around, your focus will be locked, and it's very similar to a professional camera. There's also a setting down here for visual intelligence that doesn't have much to do with actually taking photos. It's more of an Apple Intelligence feature, but I do have the press and hold feature turned on here as well. The next thing you want to dive into is photographic styles. Now, these are essentially filters for your iPhone, and I'll just leave this on standard, and you're going to understand later in this video why I do this, because we are able to change this even after we take photos. But if you want to just speed up your workflow and there's a certain filter that you like, you can definitely scroll across all of them and then select whichever one you like. Now you can also customize them. So if I hit the customize button at the bottom here, you're gonna notice that it shows you the default setting for that specific filter at the bottom, but you can move this little dot around to go ahead and change the saturation and the exposure. The top right corner is the brightest and most saturated version. The bottom right is the darkest and most saturated version. The bottom left is the darkest and least saturated version. And the top left is the brightest and least saturated version. And you can go ahead and change this for any of the filters. If you want to ever go back, you just hit this reset button at the top and it brings the filter back. But like I said, I just use standard because you can change this even after you take the photo. So it's totally a preference thing. And I really like how Apple has provided these 4 image examples that lets you sort of experiment and see how each filter would affect different styles of photos. Okay, so next up, with photographic styles out of the way, we're actually gonna dive into formats. So under formats for camera capture, I have high efficiency selected. And the reason that I'm actually using this format instead of most compatible is that this is the format that allows you to go in and take a photo and actually be able to apply photographic styles or change your photographic styles after the matter. I'll definitely show you that later in this video, but it's really important that you pick high efficiency for your format. Next up, you're gonna go down to photo capture and you wanna make sure that 24 megapixels is selected. That 24 megapixels is the max megapixel resolution that you can get in the high efficiency mode. We're definitely gonna talk about how you get 48 megapixels, but you want to make sure that you're locked into 24 megapixels here. Now, next up, you have to activate this in order to be able to take 48 megapixel photos. You want to turn on your Pro RAW and resolution control, and under Pro RAW format, I just have JPEG lossless most compatible selected. I found throughout my testing that picking the others and having a more larger file doesn't really do anything. The JPEG lossless most compatible format is the best one for you to pick in terms of quality and size. Okay, now with formats out of the way, we're going to dive into preserve settings, and here I literally turn on every single item here. It doesn't matter what you have, just make sure you have them all turned on. And the reason for that is that every single time you turn your camera app on and off, every time you come in, you want to make sure that it's exactly as how you left it, so you don't have to go in and change all of these settings that I'm going to show you every single time. It really makes capturing photos much easier and a lot quicker, and you have to really think about it less, which lets you stay in the moment more and take really nice photos. Next up, we're going to come down into composition, and similarly, I also turn on everything here. So there's a grid, a level. I like to mirror the front camera, and I also like to see the outside frame of what's possible for me to take photos if I'm using a different lens. I find that it's just helpful for me. Again, these are all visual changes, but I would turn them all on anyways. Next up, we have the photo capture section. So for Fusion camera, which I'll show you how to use in a second, you want to make sure that 28mm and 35mm are turned on, but your default is set to 24mm, which is that traditional 1x that we're used to seeing. After this, we want to turn off prioritizing faster shooting. So we want to make sure the camera focuses on quality and not speed. Next up, I have lens correction turned on. So I don't like it when photos are super warped or super fish-eyed, and this just helps correct the ultra wide to make sure that your photo looks nice and normal while capturing as much of the scene as possible. Following this, I have macro control turned on as well because I want to be able to manually control when the macro lens turns on and off. And again, we will demonstrate this. Something new that I noticed here is lens cleaning hints. And I noticed it the first time that I turned on my iPhone 17, my lens was a little bit dirty, and there's actually a prompt on the screen telling me to go ahead and clean my camera lens. And I found that super helpful because a lot of time people don't realize how much better quality photos they can get just by cleaning their iPhone lens. It's truly incredible. So make sure you have this turned on. And under messages, I also have turned on save capture to photo library, just in case I take a photo from the Messenger app. I want to make sure that it still saves to my photo library. Okay, now with all of our settings changed in the deep settings menu, we can jump back into the camera app to change some of those more refined items to help you dial in your photos. Okay, so we're going to dive right back into the camera app, and we're going to start in the top right. So you're going to hit these 6 dots, and that's going to present you with 6 camera options. The first thing I do is I turn off live photos. Live photos actually decreases the quality of your photos, and I know it's a great feature, and a lot of people like to be able to go ahead and change the moment of the photo they actually took, but my solution to that is just take more photos or take videos. I don't want to prioritize losing quality to capture more of the moment when I can just shoot faster pretty much. So I personally have live photos turned off. Next up, we're going to dive into the exposure settings. Now I usually change mine to around -0.7 or -1. Most of the time it's at -0.7. It just depends on the brightness of the scene. But overall, I find that Apple always has their photos a little bit overexposed. So this helps to dial them back and introduce proper contrast and richness in your photos, which I really like. So make sure you have this set to -0.7. This might be the most important setting that you change. Next up, we have aspect ratio, and this is one that people really tend to ignore for some reason, and you want to make sure that this is set to 4:3. and not anything else. This makes sure that you can use your entire sensor to capture as much of the scene as possible. I feel like shooting in 16:9 is just a waste because you're losing a ton of information that your camera could be capturing. You can always crop in post later. So make sure you have your aspect ratio set to 4:3. And then finally we have night mode, which I really love on the iPhones. It works really well. I have this set to auto, so it'll basically determine when you're in a really dark scene and night mode needs to be used, and most of the time it's pretty good at it. You can also turn this off, but I personally leave this on auto. And if you jump back into your main camera settings out of these 6 dots, you will notice that there's an icon for a moon in the top right, and that also controls night mode, and you can really quickly use this to turn it off if it's being turned on and you don't want it to be turned on. But most of the time, again, I just have this set to auto. My flash I also have set to as off. I'll go ahead and change this and turn this on if the situation requires for it, but I find that that is very rare. And then finally, the most important setting for me personally, and what I said this to really depends on the moment. So if you tap on the top left, you're gonna notice that you now have the option to select both your formats and your resolution. So HEIC is what I use most of the time on an every single day basis at 48 megapixels. Now it will crop down to 24 megapixels for certain lenses depending on what zoom range you're in, but if you're in the 1x, it will try and take a 48 megapixel photo. But if I want to take the highest quality photos and I want to be able to edit them afterwards, which is what I do when I really need a photo to stand out and I'm not shooting in my everyday scenario. So in my everyday scenario, I am using the HEIC 48 megapixel format, but if I want to take professional photos and I really want to edit them after, I switch over to RAW and I make sure that it's still in the 48 megapixel mode. Again, it will bin down to 12 megapixels depending on what lens you're in, but this is the mode that I'm always using whenever I want to capture the highest quality photos, and this is the setting that I used when I captured all the photos that you saw at the beginning of this video. And speaking of megapixels, there is something I want to quickly touch on. The 8x optical zoom lens is capped at 12 megapixels. Now, a lot of people for some reason sounded upset at this, but we do have to keep in mind that last year on the iPhone 16 Pro Max, the highest focal length that we had was 5x, and that was also 12 megapixels. So now that 5x is still 12 megapixels, it's only now an 8x, so you can zoom further with the same quality. And you also have a 4x camera that's 48 megapixels that you didn't have before. So I just want to clear that up for anyone that had any confusion regarding the megapixels on the new zoom lenses. And then finally, the last thing we have is macro control. So if you bring your iPhone close to an object that you want to use macro on and you bring it close enough using the 1x camera, you're going to see this flower icon appear in the bottom left. Now, if you select it and it turns yellow, that means that your macro lens is activated and you can get as close to the subject as you want. And if you tap it again and it grays out with a line across it, that means the macro lens is no longer in use. And you're only going to see this icon if you turned on the macro control setting like I showed you earlier. And I feel like it's important to have this setting on because you really want to be in control when you're using macro mode or not. Okay, now with the front facing cameras out of the way, let's dive into the brand new 18 megapixel center stage selfie camera. And activating selfies is the same as always. You just hit this little circular arrow icon in the bottom right and this takes you into selfie mode. Now we're going to start off with the formats in the top left corner right away, and I'm going to get this out of the way very quickly. I only use HEIC for selfies. You can take them in RAW if you want to edit them later in post, but I feel like that kind of defeats the purpose of a selfie. It's supposed to be more in the moment and natural and not too overly professional, so I leave the format on HEIC. If you click the 6 dots in the top right, all of the settings here are exactly the same as the front facing cameras, along with the flash as well as the night mode. Now let's talk about how to activate center stage, which is a really cool new feature that Apple showcased on the new iPhones. And it basically allows it to use its new square sensor to have people automatically come into your frame and the camera will expand. And the way you activate it is that you simply tap on this little face icon with the box around it, and then you can hit auto zoom on as well as auto rotate on to switch into the center stage selfie mode, and that's how you activate it. So now it's fully live. Now personally, I don't like to use this, and the reason for that is that whenever you take a photo in the center stage mode, it actually degrades the quality quite significantly. So you can notice that the photo is actually a 7 megapixel photo, which is not really the highest quality, especially when the camera is capable of 18 megapixels. So while the center stage selfie is really cool, I personally will be leaving this off. I just find that I can change the settings manually if I want to do so. Now, to ensure that you get that 18 megapixels, you're actually going to want to click these two bi-directional arrows, and that expands your scene to make it as large as possible, and it makes it wider. And this is how you're going to get the highest quality selfies in that 18 megapixel mode. Now, something really cool that's new on the iPhone 17 is that if you hit the icon right next to those double arrows, it's actually going to switch your selfie into a landscape mode. And as long as it's fully expanded, this will also be an 18 megapixels. So this is the feature that I'm really excited about and that I'm going to be using really often. I'm going to be switching between the ultra wide vertical selfies as well as the ultra wide landscape selfies, and I'm just gonna be doing that manually to make sure that I get those 18 megapixel photos instead of basically letting center stage do the work for me. So it's just basically the same results. I'm just doing it manually to get a higher megapixel count in my selfies. And then finally, there is this little F icon in the bottom left that you can hit to go ahead and change into portrait mode. And this is how you activate it. Personally, I don't really use this because I don't like the bokeh that smartphones create. It's not really for me. You can switch between a few different lighting options like you've always been able to in portrait mode, but personally, I just keep this off. And that's everything. Those are all the settings that you need to change for photos to get the best possible photos out of your brand new iPhone 17, 17 Pro, Pro Max, Air, even if you have an older iPhone, whatever it is. This video should help you tremendously and really help you level up your photo game. If you got something out of this video, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed, but that's it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one, and until then, keep creating.